Mr. Ice, you may begin your conference.
Thank you very much, Carol, and welcome everyone to our latest drought webinar for the Midwest and the Great Plains. Today we are honored to have Dr. Dennis Toddy, South Dakota State climatologist, as our speaker, and we will have others on the panel here with us to answer questions, and including several folks, including myself, if there's any questions from the National Weather Service side. Doug Cluck is also here from NCDC, and also Kevin Grody from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Dennis. Dennis, all yours.
Thank you, John. Good to have everybody here today. Hope you are enjoying your last full week before the Thanksgiving week. We are having a very clear day up here in South Dakota, so a little precipitation probably wouldn't be a bad thing for us. So John is correct. We're continuing our series of move to monthly now webinars talking about the drought status and outlook and some of the impact issues that we're dealing with here throughout the Midwest and Great Plains. So thank you all for joining us. Good to have you with us. So let's get right into it. Again, this is a combination of, there we go, a combination of a large number of different climate service partners, including NOAA, the National Weather Service, the Regional Climate Center, state climatologists, USDA, USGS, Army Corps of Engineers were also contributing on this one, talking about some of the river management issues. So just showing the broad range of climate services that are occurring at the federal, state, local level, and the cooperation that goes on. The next webinar is going to be occurring in a little over a month on the 20th of December, also at 1 p.m. Central Time. This one is going to go back to the National Drought Mitigation Center. Brian Fuchs is going to be our host this time. And I should mention National Drought Mitigation Center was also a partner and contributed to today. Again, the recording and the slides from this webinar will be placed on the Midwest Regional Climate Center and the High Plains Regional Climate Center for viewing later or to share with other people. And we will have questions at the end because of the dynamics here. We need to hold them till the end. The operator will come back on and we'll deal with any questions you have at that point, or myself or any of the other panelists involved here. Our agenda is, as usual, looking at kind of current conditions and historical impact, or historical context, current impacts, what the outlooks are saying, and then we'll deal with questions. I just wanted to refer, the slide was kind of on the right, or excuse me, the picture on there is from Pierre, South Dakota, a rather ironic picture. I was leaving Pierre on the way back to Brookings after talking about the Dust Bowl and talking about the unlikelihood of another Dust Bowl occurring. This was just east of Pierre, and within about a mile, there was greatly reduced visibility. This was during the major wind event we had in the middle of October, and someone was doing some tillage, picking up a lot of dust that was limiting visibility on the roadway. So I found it a rather ironic twist after talking about the Dust Bowl. Okay, kind of a summary of what we're dealing with right now is, in the current situation, we have seen some improved conditions in the eastern part of the Corn Belt. We'll be showing you the situation there. Several rain events have greatly reduced or eliminated drought conditions in those areas. Greatly in contrast with the plains, where we have seen limited or no recovery throughout much of the plains area. The northern plains a little bit better off. And colder temperatures are pushing close to the freezing condition. I'll show you a map talking about that here in a little bit. Some stream flow issues we're going to talk a little bit more about also. On an outlook standpoint, we're going to struggle a little bit with the outlooks, talking about what's going to be happening because of various issues. The El Nino that we thought was going to happen is not going to happen likely, which is giving us a spin in our outlooks and trying to determine what is really going to be happening. The outlooks are hinting at kind of a pattern change where we could be going into some cooler conditions in the northern plains areas. We'll talk more about that. Precipitation chances, especially with the lack of El Nino, La Nina, really not well defined. Very hard to determine really what's going to be going on. And from a drought standpoint, really looking at, especially in the northern areas, really limited chances for much recovery until the springtime, partially because of the amount of precipitation we can expect during the wintertime, and partially because issues related to soil moisture, lack of soil moisture, and soils are going to be freezing up. So we'll dive into more of those as we go along here. So let's start off with kind of looking back at recent precipitation. Right on the left-hand side is the last full 3-month map from NOAA's National Climatic Data Center, and getting the statewide ranks for precipitation. Greener areas are above average to much above average precipitation. The higher the number, the higher ranking is on 118 years available. And you can see, as I mentioned, on the eastern part of the Corn Belt, ranking much higher than they had been previously. The plains, central and northern plains area, you see very low rankings. A large part of that is carryover from the late summer in August, but we did have several states that were very dry in September too, and October has brought some precipitation, but still coming in quite low. Giving you some more comparison to amounts, the slide on the right-hand side, the slightly displaced time period, we're looking at the last 90 days on the slide on the right from the High Plains Regional Climate Center, whereas the slide on the left is August, September, October. But you can still see the similar pattern and a little bit more detail. Again, over Illinois, Indiana, parts of Ohio, looking at 3 to 6 or more inches above average precipitation, greatly in contrast to what we saw in the early part of the year. So we've seen a decent amount of recovery in those areas. Whereas you look from Iowa and then to the northwest, Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, much less than average precipitation over the last 90 days, on the order of 6 inches plus short of precipitation over parts of Minnesota and parts of Nebraska, also down into Oklahoma. So kind of a tale of two cities or two stories, depending on which part of the region we're looking at. Okay, let's go on here, looking at from a temperature standpoint, what's happened. Let's start with the lower right-hand side, where we ranked statewide in October. The blue area is indicating below normal, below average temperatures throughout the middle part of the country through October. This surprised me a little bit. It didn't appear to be that cold during the month of October overall, but we did come in cool. I think a fair amount of that is due to the overnight lows dropping off very quickly. With a lack of moisture, our overnight lows dropped off fairly quickly, quite often, so that was helping some of the cold bias and overall cooler temperatures. But if you look over the last 30 days, specifically from the middle of October till the present in the upper left-hand map, the green areas are indicating a little bit cooler than average temperatures. Yellow areas indicating up to 2 to 3 degrees above average over that time period. So not too far away from average at this point. Not too widely dissimilar. At this time of year, also, we get concerned about when the frost occurred. Because of the early harvest season, there was really little issue with when the frost freeze occurred, and with cooler temperatures, there was really no major issues related there. Also related to temperatures, trying to encompass more of our area here, one of the recent reports has been, from a water standpoint, warmer than average lake temperatures. This one is specifically for Lake Superior. And this shows in the blue line the 20-year average lake surface temperature from the beginning of the year until the end of December. The red line shows where we were this year. You can see throughout the middle of summer, in keeping with the very warm temperatures, also had very warm lake temperatures. And whereas the other lakes that reported, and this is from the Great Lakes RESA as part of NOAA, the other lakes have returned to right at average lake temperatures. Lake Superior is still running a degree or two above average at this point, so carrying over some of that heat, partially maybe some of that heat going on right now. So also reported from the Great Lakes have been record low water levels. The Army Corps of Engineers reported Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and Superior were all at near record low levels in October. Again, with increased temperatures adding to evaporation, decreased inflows from rainfall around them, leading to some of the low lake levels that we have seen. We're also reaching the time of year as we get into November where we start looking at snow cover again. Checking in with plains, we'll do plains, and then we'll do mountain snow cover here in the next slide. This is from I don't remember what the acronym is, the no-risk group, or depending on how you pronounce the acronym and who you're talking about, showing this is a multidimensional model map that shows snow cover as of yesterday, and the gray areas and you can see the scale on the side traced 2 inches, and then a little bit more up into North Dakota and Montana. Multiple reasons why we're concerned about snow cover at this point. One is because of the more snow cover we have, the better chance for cold air outbreaks we have to extend down into the middle part of the country with air continuing to sit and cross over the cold of the snow areas. Also tracking how much moisture is going to be available in the mountains and the plains as we're looking at what will happen next year in the way of runoff for various reasons. Any kind of surface runoff is going to be very important next year. So those are all reasons why we're tracking this. So we do have a decent amount of snow cover already. This obviously will be updating as we go along. Our next slide is from NRCS. This is the looking at very early snowpack in the mountain areas, and specifically the area, if you can see the cursor here, we're looking at the headwater areas of the Missouri and Yellowstone up here in Montana, on into Wyoming, and then parts of Wyoming go into the Platte. The scale over here shows that the green areas are around average for snowpack at this time of the year. The yellow area is 70 to 90%, and redder areas down below 50%. Again, remember, we are very early in the season. This is not much more of the accumulation occurs later in the season, so we obviously will watch this. But early season snowpack is running a bit behind in the upper levels, headwaters areas of these rivers. Another impact area, kind of looking at some of the ag issues, moving on, has been noted is winter wheat and winter wheat emergence. Winter wheat is planted in the fall. It breaks dormancy, grows a little bit, and then goes into dormancy again over the winter to regrow in the springtime. But there have been some issues related to this across parts of the region. The lower right-hand side shows where the winter wheat areas are, where the winter wheat areas are grown across the country from USDA. You can see Montana, and then all through the Central Plains, and then parts of the Corn Belt do grow some winter wheat in areas, but the darker green areas are the bigger winter wheat growing areas. So what we're showing you here is the states listed, the percent emerged, and the 5-year average, so you can compare those two numbers. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. And you can see the big one here pointing out is not to be colloquial, but South Dakota is kind of sticking out as in by this time of year, 97% of winter wheat has emerged and started to grow. We're at only 43% this year, way behind. Again, very drought-related, very dry soils, not allowing the seed to break dormancy. The interesting thing on the right-hand side, the yellow areas highlighted are percent of the winter wheat that is in poor to very poor condition. A number of the states really not too bad, but you can see the plain states sticking out: Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, with large percentages of the winter wheat in poor to very poor condition. If we went down into Oklahoma, you would see another part of those. We have these on a graphic that I got near the end from a late arrival from USDA. The winter wheat progress in the upper left-hand side, showing the states and where they are compared to the 5-year average, similar to the table that we showed you. And then the winter wheat conditions, the blue areas in good shape, the green states showing some problems, and then Nebraska and South Dakota, the two critical ones, showing really no real problems with, showing real problems with winter wheat emergence at this time of year. One more slide on winter wheat, and then we'll go on. The winter wheat areas, another part of USDA. Winter wheat areas located in drought. These are the 4 drought categories, and the percent of winter wheat located in drought going from June to the present. And the tan areas are the percent of the areas that are in D1. The brownish umber, I guess, color in D2. The red area D3, and then the brown area. Almost a quarter of the winter wheat is in D4 conditions. And I'm sure the winter wheat folks are becoming very aware of this situation we're dealing with here. So moving on to the next step, another one of the impact areas is stream flow. This is from the USGS yesterday also, indicating stream flow percentiles compared to this time of year. The scale is on the bottom. The areas that are in blue, you can see over in the far eastern part of the Corn Belt into the Appalachians, carryovers from the leftovers of Sandy being very wet there. Green areas are in the middle of the distribution. They may be a little dry, but nothing too untoward. And then the areas that are in tan to brown to red are quite dry. So you can see from northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, over in Iowa, Minnesota, and then further out into the central and southern plains, we have lots of streams that are running quite dry for this time of year, which they typically run a bit drier at this time of year. So to show that they are drier than that is showing, like the first slide I showed you from the Des Moines River in Iowa, very low at this time of year. These overall stream flow issues are also related to some problems occurring with stream flows on the Missouri and the Mississippi River. I'm going to hand it over here to Kevin Grody from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to talk a little bit about their stream flow management and a couple of the impacts we're having there. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Dennis. This is Kevin Grody with the Missouri River Basin Water Management Office in Omaha, Nebraska. This graph depicts the total system storage on the 6 main stem reservoirs on the Missouri River. The current storage in the system is 49.5 million acre feet on November 15th of 2012. And you can see that's about more than 7 million acre feet below the base of the annual flood control multiple use zone. So we can see that we're starting to see the effects of the very dry conditions throughout the basin. Our projection for most likely to start the next runoff season, which would be on or about March 1st of 2013, is 48.7 million acre feet. So about 1 million acre feet less than what we're seeing right now. And that really is based on the fact that we're going to start reducing releases next Friday, the 23rd of November, down to our minimum winter releases. Navigation season flow support ends December 1st at the mouth near St. Louis. So the plan right there is kind of outlined at the bottom left. Gavin's Point release reductions to winter releases will begin November 23rd. Our current release is about 36,500, and we will slowly reduce those releases over a 2-week period, ideally to reach that winter release of 12,000 CFS. We realize that the lower channel has changed due to the record releases made during the drought of 2011. So we're going to very slowly move down that last few thousand CFS and just to ensure that the municipal and industrial intake owners in the lower reach of the river are not adversely affected by that. So the goal is to reach 12,000. And that's all I have to add. Back to you, Dennis.
Thanks, Kevin. There is some concern further downstream because of the drought conditions on the Mississippi River. Stream flows are fairly low on the Mississippi River, and flows out of the Missouri have been contributing to keep the channel open between St. Louis and Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio comes in. And there is concern about the ability to ship there, but that is outside the control of the Missouri River folks. That is on the Mississippi River. But there has been there's been political questions about and concern about trying to be able to keep that shipping path open because of the overall drought situation. As we move on, kind of soil moisture and recovery, again getting back at what we had talked about earlier about some recovery in the eastern part of the Corn Belt. This is a map from a previous webinar I did going back to August, and what the soil moisture, this is the total soil moisture normally in millimeters. So you divide this number by about 25 so that the orangish areas are 4 to 6 or inches below average. This was back in August. If you compare that with the current map on the lower left-hand side, you can see those areas that have been wet. Indiana, Illinois, and this is a computer model, has recovered much of their deficit. But the other areas, as we go into, along mentioned earlier about northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, getting over to Minnesota and Iowa, and looking in the southern plains, we still have some very steep soil moisture deficits. Greg Spoden, the state climatologist in Minnesota, noted that also, that is a real concern for them for the dry soil conditions, and on out through the plains where we have not seen, or we have seen very little precipitation this fall, adding to very little soil moisture recovery, whereas the Eastern Corn Belt has recovered somewhat. We're also getting to a point of watching what is going on in the way of soil temperature conditions. I mentioned earlier what kind of soil moisture recharge we can get at. Once that we freeze up, that area, we really probably will not get any kind of soil moisture recovery once soil freezes up. The USDA has stopped putting out their widespread soil temperature maps. This is from the High Plains Regional Climate Center. The areas that are in the lighter pinkish are below 30, a little bit darker colors are 32. So you can see the Dakotas getting close to that freezing level on over to Minnesota, similar patterns. Further south, we're down in the 30s, but still a little ways from freezing just yet. So there can be some more soil moisture recovery. Up in the Dakotas and parts of Minnesota, we're very close to ending our soil moisture recovery at this point in the year. We wrap this all up. Here's the most recent U.S. drought monitor from this morning. You can see, again, the U.S. drought monitor, white areas are no drought issues. Yellowish areas are abnormally dry but no impacts. And then going from D1, moderate drought in the tan, to the dark reddish D4, exceptional drought. Much of the east, again, is very little drought issues. The Pacific Northwest, not much. The rest of the country, large drought issues. We'll zoom on up into the Midwest and Great Plains to give you a zoomed-in view. Eastern areas, very little in the way of drought issues, but once you reach Iowa, Minnesota, and then South Dakota down to Kansas and Colorado, large part of that area, D3 to D4. Only currently about 11.4% of the whole map here is in D4, but if you go in those areas, it's a high percentage still without much recovery going on at this point. Okay, going on to the climate outlooks, what's happening and what we can say about what's going to be going on. We'll again take the 2 week outs. I did not update, I apologize, the December outlook and the December to February outlook. These were released this morning. So let's move on here. First off, part of the problem we've had, I alluded to this at the beginning, I called the El Nino fake out. It looked very likely like we were going to be going into at least a weak El Nino this winter. And what we're looking at here, this is in the Pacific Ocean, a loop of sea surface temperatures. The areas, the more red areas are degrees C above average sea surface temperatures. The blue areas are degrees C below average sea surface temperatures. And you see at the beginning of this loop back in August, there was a fair amount of warm water in the Eastern Pacific, and that disappears as time goes on. You see throughout much of the Eastern Pacific, there are really not much in the way of positive sea surface temperatures, so very much in El Nino neutral, in neutral conditions. So that produces differences or problems with our outlooks, because when we are in El Nino or La Nina are times when we have our best ability to do outlooks. One other oscillation that has come into discussion in the outlook this month is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. The map here shows what we're looking at. The PDO is I call it decadal because whereas El Nino is a every few months interannual sort of change, the PDO changes on the order of decadally. And the plot on the lower right-hand side kind of shows how it's changed since 1950. It is variable, but it does kind of go into phases and stay in phases for fairly long periods of time. The phase we're in right now is the cold phase, which is on the right-hand side, largely cooler than average water off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. The PDO is not a terribly good forecaster, but it does kind of work in conjunction with El Ninos, but that was kind of taken into consideration in some of the outlooks we're looking at this month for the forecasters. So let's go on and go ahead at the 8 to 14-day outlook for November 22nd and 28th. Temperature on the left-hand side, precipitation on the right-hand side. Largely, most of the U.S. has a higher probability of being above average temperatures, except for the far southeast, far southeastern U.S. in this time period. The brown areas across the southern U.S. likely less than average chances for precipitation, fairly likely to stay dry, it looks like, whereas the green areas along the northern tier of states, Pacific Northwest over to North Dakota and around the Great Lakes, has a better chance for precipitation. So looks like around our Great Lakes areas, North Dakota, Montana, have some better chances for the storm track is still staying kind of bottled up in that area. Areas to the south, little chances for precipitation. If you're looking for drought recovery, not as good. If you're looking for travel plans for Thanksgiving, a little better off. Moving on to the December outlook, see kind of a marked change now. Again, the forecasters have kind of been struggling with what we can say and what we can say with confidence going on here. But what we're looking at from a December standpoint, temperature on the left-hand side, indicating the blue area with slightly increased chances of being below average temperatures. This is a bit of a shift from what was talked about last month with the El Nino going away, looking at the dynamic models, the computer models, and then looking at kind of what the PDO might be saying for us. Warmer along the southern tier of states, whereas a better chance of being colder than average over the north central part of the U.S. Other forecasters have kind of agreed with that, looking at some other indicators. Again, the indicators are not all directing the same way, so this is going to be kind of a watch and see outlook for the winter. The precipitation, the one thing that the forecasters are kind of agreeing on here is increased chances for precipitation in the Ohio Valley. With the storm track moving up the Ohio Valley, bringing them additional precipitation. Other places, not anything consistent really to hang your head on. The 3-month outlook, you'll see, looks very much like the 30-day. December through February, the area of warmth does extend, slightly better chance for being warmer, extends up into the southern parts of the Central Plains, parts of our region, whereas the cool area moves slightly further to the east, but still a very similar pattern. Also the same, slightly modified but similar pattern in precipitation. Forecasts are thinking that we're going to get a lot of the similar pattern during the winter months going on. So stay tuned, definitely. We're going to have to keep an eye on some of the oscillations, the shorter-term oscillations that are going to be happening. Bring this all together in the drought outlook, what this could mean for us. This is valid through the end of February. Again, looking at is the drought going to persist? If you're in droughts, are you going to improve, which is shown by some of the hatched areas, or some improvement possible? The green areas with improvement likely, and then are there any places that are going to develop? Throughout the western part of the area, the Great Plains, persistence is likely. 2 factors, really no indicators of above average chances for precipitation, and overall the expected amount of precipitation during the wintertime would not make great improvements in our drought situation. Certainly some snowfall precipitation would be very welcome during the wintertime. Just the total amounts typically will not make big inroads on the deficits we built up over time. The northern tier of states and over into the Mississippi Valley, the hatched areas, places where we are expecting maybe a little more activity, a little more chances for precipitation, so some improvement is possible. We've had several storms across North Dakota and Montana, northern Minnesota, have some other chances for those going on, so you could see some improvement. And potentially that wet area of the Ohio Valley maybe extending up to give a little bit of improvement to areas around it. So some chances there. Main part of the plains, really not a whole lot in the way of changes coming on. Okay, summary. Our summary ends up being that, again, improved conditions, Eastern Corn Belt, lack of recovery in the plains, probably not going to improve an awful lot. We're going to be looking at springtime, really needing spring precipitation to help improve the situation. El Nino is really not going to happen. Some changing patterns then because of the lack of El Nino, and really not a whole lot of recovery until spring. One thing we did want to mention too, there was a question last time about federal drought response. One place to find out what activities and USDA drought assistance that are available, an easy place to find that is to go to the U.S. drought portal, drought.gov, and then on the upper right-hand side as a link to USDA federal drought assistance. which the arrow indicates the page it will take you to, where you'll see various pieces of information on USDA drought assistance, drought recovery related to that. So that is one location you can go to find out more information about USDA drought. Okay, again, a reminder of all of our partners and how to link to some of the information: National Climatic Data Center, the Climate Prediction Center, Climate Portal, climate.gov and drought.gov, state climatologists in the region who did contribute information about local problems they're having, and information from the regional climate centers and the National Drought Mitigation. So, thank you. Here are contact information for some of the folks who are involved, and we now open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by the number 1 from your telephone keypad. Once again, that is star followed by the number 1. And we'll pause for just a moment to compile the roster.
Say, Dennis, this is Doug. Can you back up one slide so people can see what those URLs are?
Yeah, there you go. And all of the folks did contribute pieces of information to the webinar. So they're all very good partners in contributing to this.
Okay, and your first question comes from the line of Doug Holscher.
Good afternoon. This is Doug Holscher with Governor Branstad's office in Iowa. If we could go back to the individual who spoke on, perhaps it was a Corps representative, on the release from the Missouri River Basin. Could you talk a little bit about initial feedback that you've gotten from utilities up and down the river and what that feedback has been?
Yeah, this is Kevin Grody with the Missouri River Basin Water Management Office. Back in September, we sent out emails to all the intake owners from Gavin's Point all the way down to the mouth, letting them know what our plans were, reducing down to minimum releases of 12,000 out of Gavin's Point. We've been to that level in the past. During the last drought, which ended in 2007, we were at 12,000 for several times. So this is not new territory as far as these types of releases. But we have been in contact with each of the individual intake owners, asking them to verify the critical levels that their intakes are at. Again, we are very cognizant of the fact that the river has changed somewhat in some areas due to the historic releases made out of the system in 2011. So we're being very cautious as we reduce those releases down to the minimum level. We've assured all the intake owners downstream that water supply is extremely important to everyone there. So 12,000 is a goal. We may not reach it right away. We may not reach it at all during this winter. It really depends on what we see over the next few weeks. Over.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, for any questions or comments, you may press star followed by the number 1 from your telephone keypad at this time.
Hi, this is Doug Cluck again. Not a question so much, but more of a comment that, in case you're interested, we'll continue holding these types of webinars on a monthly basis for the foreseeable future. It may become a routine thing for us to just do these from now on, but with all the interests and such. But just want to let you know the next one will be December 20th. I think Dennis has already mentioned that. So hopefully we can deliver some sort of Christmas present at that point.
Just to add on to what Doug is saying, we are working on developing a landing page so we can point people to that landing page to sign up for these webinars and not have to rely on the email reminders about this. So once we get that, we'll start disseminating that to people more widely.
And your next question comes from the line of Paul Lepisto.
Thanks very much, Kevin. If you're still on, interested to know if you sent the emails to people needing water below Gavin's Point Dam. Has that same email been sent to the intakes and the people that need the water supply in the reservoirs?
Hey, Paul. Well, when it comes to the releases out of some of the reservoirs, such as Fort Peck and Garrison, those are going to be more normal, around the normal range. And downstream of those, some of those reservoirs, we have been in contact with those folks, and I think you were at one of the annual operating plan meetings. So we've communicated with those folks more on a one-on-one basis. Over.
Roger that.
And we have no further questions at this time.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining today, and we'll have the recording and the presentation available for you shortly. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's Drought webinar. You may now disconnect.